Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Megan Henry, and I'm joined by Jen again. Hey, Jen.
Hi, happy to be here again.
Yes, happy to have you. And I'm so happy today you brought another guest to me and an amazing one at that.
Yes, today's guest is Monica Logan, and she and I worked together about 14, 15 years ago. We first met, and she was my colleague, and she's just continued to move up the ranks as I know she would have. She is just an amazing person, an amazing parent, and an amazing insurance handler, if you will. So I'm so excited for her to be here today.
Yeah. And I think, as you described her, she's one of your most impressive friends. And she is. So, with that, let's bring her in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.
Good morning, Monica. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And I need to share because our listeners need to know this was no easy feat to start recording this today. We're on day 2 of attempting this recording and on a new platform today because we experienced all the difficulties. So I can't even when I say I'm happy to have you here, I really mean it because we've just not been able to get it together until today.
All the guilt is finally falling off me. I really felt so badly that we were having so many troubles.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have 3 lawyers in charge of tech. It doesn't work very well. Well, I'm really happy that you're on. You were introduced to me via Jen because you guys go kind of way back, right?
It's been a while. It's probably been, I think we first met maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah, sad
Around
to
there.
say.
Yeah.
I forget how old I am sometimes. But yes, we worked together about 15 years ago, starting and worked together for a few years before we both part ways and went into different areas of the industry, I should say.
Right.
Well, and you have kind of a similar path to Jen in some respect too, because you're an attorney, right? And then you went into claims from being a practicing attorney, which Jen did too, and then she came back, but
I question that decision all the time. No, I'm just kidding, Megan, just kidding.
It's brave. It's a brave move.
But like many of us, or like many people I have on the podcast, attorneys and people in claims, this was not the career path that they had envisioned for themselves or thought they would be on. So what's your story? Did you always know you wanted to go to law school, or were you like me that you knew you had nothing, you didn't know what else you could do, so you kind of decided, well, I got to do something?
Actually, I knew fairly young, probably around when I was 14, that I wanted to go to law school. And I don't really know the impetus for like that. But in high school, I was very fortunate to be part of an award-winning mock trial team. So
Mhm.
I just knew I wanted to be a litigator. And I had 2 great teachers. I had an amazing team, and they were very assertive. And many of us who are on that mock trial team are actually lawyers.
Mhm.
So that was I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and then from then on, I went to college in Chicago and then law school in Chicago as well. And I did practice as a litigator for a few years prior to moving to Connecticut in
Mhm.
2003, and that's when things changed. So
So, you know, as someone who grew up in Connecticut, how was that transition from Chicago to Connecticut for you?
yeah, it's a good question. The thing is, in Connecticut, people are really nice.
They're not nice in Chicago?
No, they're super nice in
Oh.
Chicago. In Connecticut, you got to kind of get in there a little bit to find it.
Mhm.
I remember the first time I went to the grocery store after having moved to Connecticut, and I was pretty young. I was 26, 27. And I went to the grocery store and I walked in. It was early in the morning, maybe around 8:30, and I looked at someone. They made eye contact with me, and I said, "Good morning." And she looked at me like I just gave her the finger. I'm like, no, I really mean it. Good morning.
Why are you
It's
being
not the same.
sarcastic?
Right. So, but then I realized after that, sometimes it just required a little softening. But the environment here is really positive as a general rule. So, after a little while and getting used to the different way people go about being nice, it was fine.
Well, it's kind of funny you say that because now I live in New Jersey after growing up in Connecticut, and when we moved to our house and like I think someone else moved in nearby, I was like, oh no, I think it's when we moved into our house. I was like, oh, I can't wait to move in. Like people are gonna the welcome wagon's gonna come by, and my husband's like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, when the neighborhood people come and they welcome you to the neighborhood, he's like, no one does that here, and I was like, well, why not? Like that's what people did where I grew up.
That's true. That's true. We did have a neighbor deliver us a coffee cake. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, my neighborhood has come around and there is a welcome package that goes to every new resident to the neighborhood. But when we moved in, that didn't occur.
Hmm.
So New Jersey's evolving.
New Jersey. Yeah.
So you go to law school and you're going to be a litigator and you litigated for some time. What type of cases were you handling at that time?
Yeah, I got thrown into the deep end. I did plaintiff's personal injury work
Oh,
for a few years, and it was tough. It was a definite baptism of fire. So the day after I got sworn in from the bar, I did my very first mediation. Um,
wow.
Sure, why not?
it wasn't an overly complicated case, but still, it was. I remember being extremely nervous, and they were just like, "Okay, here you go. Here's your caseload." And you had to learn fast. It was a
Mhm.
crash and burn type of situation. And, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved the fact that I got to try a bunch of cases. Again, these weren't like high profile cases. I think I did 3 jury trials and 1 bench trial, and then a whole bunch of mediations and then arbitrations with jams. And I enjoyed it. I loved every second of it, but it was a lot.
Mhm.
And plaintiff's personal injury stuff, you're doing high volume work, and you have to pivot fast, and it was
Yeah.
stressful. So then eventually I did switch sides, and then I went to a firm and did defense work for a few months before moving to Connecticut.
Mhm. And did you find though having that plaintiff's background has like helped you in the claims world too? Because you kind of had that front lines first eyes perspective on how plaintiff's attorneys might be looking at a case, and now you're switching over not only to the defense side but now to the claim side.
Yeah, I think it helps immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to understand the mindset, especially understanding the perspective of the plaintiff's lawyer who has to manage his client, and understanding that the role that they play in controlling the expectations of their
Mm-hmm.
client as well. So it's easy to work with. You can just kind of switch the mindset. So it's definitely helpful, no question about it.
Yeah, I think there is like some misconception. At least I think I had this misconception. I don't have it anymore, but a misconception that being a plaintiff's attorney is really easy. um and then because I was like, oh, like people who would like switch over, I'm like, yeah, you're never going to come back, and then someone would come back to the defense side and they would talk about like, it's not all the grass is not totally green over there. There's different pressures, because I'm like, oh, you're so lucky you don't need to bill anymore, like your life is grand. And I mean, it's never as good as it seems, right? But it's
No,
definitely not easy.
yeah, very, very true. I mean, I remember when I switched over and then I had to get used to the billing concept,
Mm.
but I got yelled at far less than I did as a plaintiff's attorney. The expectations are so high sometimes, and people are really uh, emotionally struggling with whatever
Mhm.
issues they've been through, and you almost feel at times you're acting like a psychologist or it's more than just legal counseling. It's beyond that. On the defense side, it's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like you also like there's I think different economic pressures on the plaintiff side that I mean obviously on the defense side there's economic pressures as to billing and costs and that sort of stuff, but on the plaintiff side there's similar economic pressures just in a different way. Just like, well, yeah, they take this case, it might not be worth this much, but yeah, they have to push for some settlement in order to get some dollars in their pockets too.
Exactly. Exactly. And actually, I gained a lot of insight in insurance companies when I was working as a plaintiff's lawyer, because you start to realize which carriers are more likely to put up a fight toward any sort of settlement, and which carriers are a little bit more practical or realistic in
Hmm.
what's going to happen as far as spending defense expenses. So, if I knew I was going up against a good insurance carrier as a plaintiff's lawyer, I was going to be more uh, passive in the negotiation process because I knew we were working toward a reasonable number. It was a different attitude. So some carriers are definitely better than others at that.
Yeah, and is it true that they like share all this information on the secret little network?
I know nothing about such things.
Okay, we can talk about it later.
I have seen lawsuits about that, but as far as I'm aware, no, not at
all. So talk to us a little bit about your jump into claims, though. How did that come about for you?
Yeah, when I first moved to Connecticut, I had to take the Connecticut bar. I didn't have reciprocity from Illinois. You had to practice for 5 years, and I think I'd only practiced for almost 4. So I took the Connecticut bar, and then I was coming from a smaller school in Chicago. I'm in the New England states where there's just so many outstanding law schools, and I was just drowned out at the time. And at the time, the market was kind of flooded with lawyers anyway. So I started looking elsewhere, and I found a position at Chubb in the litigation cost management group. Basically, I was auditing defense bills. It got me out of the house and it got me working again. So that was my initial step into insurance. And then, as it turned out, I really enjoyed the culture there. So I did what I could to get into claims, which I did. And then I started off in the D&O, the Directors and Officers group.
And Jen, when did you and Monica cross paths? Like, where was it at Chubb that you guys?
Yes. So I don't know what your timeline is there. So I started at Chubb in 2010, and that you were back in Chicago at that point.
Yeah, I had moved from I was living in the Farmington Valley area in Connecticut, and then I moved back to Chicago from 2010 to 2016, and then back to Connecticut in 2016. So you started. I remember you starting at Chubb right when I was moving back to Chicago.
Yes, and Monica it was funny because although this was kind of before working from home or working from a different office was like the thing to do. I mean, everybody was essentially there in Simsbury, but like Monica was in Chicago, but she was still on all of the calls. And we talked about this before, but like she was always on, if you had a D&O question, it was always like, call Monica. So she was always our go-to in the office, even though you weren't a supervisor at that point. Or I think when I first started, you were not in any sort of leadership role. You were still an examiner.
Yeah, I think I was.
But you were always the one that we called to when we had a problem or a complex claim that we couldn't get through ourselves. It was always Monica was the fixer.
Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet.
Wait, so then what brought you back to Chicago?
Oh, I always wish I had a better answer to this question, but I got divorced from my first marriage. And then unfortunately, living in the Farmington Valley when you're 29 years old isn't exactly exciting. So I moved back to Chicago where I had family, and we did have a Chubb office in the Sears Tower there. So yeah, I moved really quickly back to Chicago and worked out of the office there. And it just so happened that our healthcare underwriting group that I primarily worked with was located there. So I worked closely with them in the office.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
When you moved back to Chicago, was there any point that you were like, all right, I'm back here. Why don't I practice again?
That's a good question. Honestly, no. At that time, I was really quite happy with what I was doing. I was enjoying it. I felt like I had a healthy balance. Because I didn't have any kids, it was just me. It was a great opportunity. I picked up everybody else's mediations in the Chicago area, and I loved doing it. To me, that was just fun. Like I really do enjoy mediations as a general rule. So I started doing a lot of extra work in regard to those mediations, and I just enjoyed it. So I was happy doing what I was doing.
And at that point, you were doing mostly the healthcare D&O, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I got promoted to the executive claim technician in 2012.
And just to backtrack, though, I can understand why you want to flee from the Farmington Valley for a bigger social life, and you didn't necessarily want your weekends to revolve around going to West Hartford, West Hartford Center. There's other things to do. Not that there's anything wrong. West Hartford Center is lovely.
No, Westford, lovely. It's absolutely lovely. Fantastic food.
Yes, great places to eat. Wonderful Whole Foods.
Yes.
It's funny though, we've been interviewing quite a few claims professionals and talking about like how people got into insurance. And I kind of did the same thing you did. I moved to Connecticut and I was like, I'm not going to look for a legal job. We're in Connecticut, we're in Hartford. It's the insurance capital of the world. I may as well just apply and work in an insurance company. And some of the conversations we've been having with people are about how a lot of people don't know that the insurance industry is out there and what jobs are available. But when you live in Connecticut, there's no excuse. I mean, you would have to really shove your head far deep in the sand to not know about the
Yes.
insurance industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, that is true. In the metropolis of Hartford, it is the beat.
A lawyer that works at an insurance company, we're a dime a dozen around here. So
so but you were at job for like a large chunk of time. And what made you evolve to decide to leave? Like how did that work for you?
I had been a Chubb for, a long time, and I wasn't sure if there were any, opportunities for me to keep progressing. So uh, there were two different sides of it. I think one was I was looking for opportunities where I could grow, and then uh, see what else was out there. I think I was at Chubb for 15 years, 16 years, which is a pretty long time. And it was time to branch out a little bit. So, I mean, my experience at Chubb was great, very positive. It was just time for me to move on.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
happens.
So
Yeah.
in 2016, you moved from Chicago back to Connecticut. So what spurred that move to go back?
Yeah, the merger. It was the Chubb Ace merger
Oh,
that
we
that
hear
prompted me
so
to
much about this.
Yeah, that prompted me to move back. I had an AVP executive claim technician role, and I cannot even begin to tell you how much I loved that role. It was a fantastic job, and I had leadership responsibilities in regard to sort of technical aspects of claim handling, but I didn't have any of the administrative like I wasn't writing anybody's review, but I would be working with people in regard to denials or complex coverage issues, things like that. And that was really my wheelhouse, and I really enjoyed it. Um, After the merger occurred, I began to get a little, and this was all me. Not this has nothing. Chubb did not lay any of this on me at all. I got nervous that me being at a different office was going to be a problem. So, after I moved to Chicago, I met my husband now in 2013. At this point in 2016, we had two babies, and I had a job I really loved, and we said, well, what if we moved to Connecticut? So we did.
Yeah, now Connecticut makes a lot more sense.
Right, right. No, I have two kids who are thriving in the school system, and it's a very different, very very different angle now.
And we talk about this quite a bit on this podcast though too, but working in claims and having like a young growing family, it kind of it works, right? Did you find that the like it just you were able to thrive in your job and kind of work your way up, but still be present for your family?
Yeah, absolutely. Jobs and claims and even underwriting, I think to a certain extent, have so much flexibility to offer in regard to timing of when you can get things accomplished. And as a mom with two small kids, you want to be there for them, but at the same time, my occupation is very important to me, and I want to do well and I want to thrive. So being able to rearrange my schedule in accordance to being present for my kids, was something I could definitely do. And then working with my husband, it's like I've got to be gone for a mediation for 3 days here. I block out that time frame, and we're able to work around it. So the flexibility is definitely great. In my opinion, it's a it's a healthier lifestyle than going full steam as a partner, at least for me. I don't think I would have been able to. There are definitely people who can succeed at doing that. I don't think I would have been one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think though too, like sometimes with law firms, there is flexibility. It's just you have to know how to use it. But like it also comes at a cost. So too, like, yeah, you can be flexible and you can, leave at 3 o'clock to do this and do that, but then you still have to bill that time later. So it's flexibility, but the cost is like you're doing it at night. But I guess I'm sure in claims it's not that much different though too. I mean, we're still, logging in at off hours.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially during the pandemic. That was
Ugh.
that was just a big mess. But yeah, definitely. So even now on a Sunday morning, if everything's quiet, it's rainy, I have a cup of coffee, I can log in and get a couple things done. I think we all do that.
Does your husband also have a flexible job? It sounds like the two of you kind of have a system going on that like he can cover when you can't, and I'm sure it's the same in reverse.
Yeah, he does. He's a web developer for actually a company in Chicago. So he works remote
Mhm.
for a Chicago company. His hours tend to be a little bit more standard, I think. But we work really well and are very communicative in regard to our varying schedules and our
Yeah.
travel and such.
Yeah, and I find that that's key, right? For both, if both parents want to have successful and thriving careers, it takes the two parents in a relationship where they're talking to each other and where they're kind of willing to fill in the gaps when the other one can't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. As Jen's husband's been working nights and fill in the gaps.
Fill in the gap.
You know, last night my husband did get called into work, and my three kids had to be in three different places at the same time. One of my carpool rides canceled because their daughter was sick, and I was like, okay, who's skipping tonight? My son was like, me. I'm like, okay.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah.
I had to like give him a warning, like this is not because you didn't want to go. This is because mommy literally cannot get you there. You're not skipping again next week. But I mean, you got to take it one day at a time.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
So tell us a little bit though about what you're doing now.
Yeah, currently I work at Cap Specialty.
Mhm.
I'm the Chief Claims Officer for D&O and financial institutions. I held that title for not too long, just a few months. Before that, I was head of the same unit. And it's great. It's a really it's a positive work environment. I have a really amazing team,
Mhm.
and I'm extremely fortunate in that regard.
Now, is this something, did this kind of like pop into your lap, or because we hear so many of these stories from a lot of guests being like, I was in this other position, I loved it, and then this recruiter reached out to me, and I just figured why not, so how did you transition over to Cap Specialty?
I was at another carrier prior to Cap Specialty, and that was during the height of the pandemic, and there were a lot of different challenging things going on at that time, and I really wanted to take some time and think about what would make me happiest
Mhm.
in at work. So I reached out to a friend who was over at Cap Specialty. I asked if they had any openings anywhere, and there happened to be one, which was actually a step down
Mhm.
from where I was at the other carrier. But because of the uh, particularly positive environment at Cap Specialty, I had lots of friends who were working there. I decided to make the move, and then once I did, maybe a year and a half after that, I was promoted to the head of the DNO FI group, and then the chief claims officer position. So
Yeah.
it was the right fit.
Yeah, and sometimes taking a step down isn't necessarily like that much of a backtrack. It just might be what you need to do in that moment of transition.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think sometimes you have to think of the bigger picture and, really what makes you happy. Where do you think you can thrive? Where do you think, people will push you to succeed, or where do you think you can push others to succeed?
Mhm.
And the environment is just so important. And for me, taking that step back was a healthy step forward.
Yeah. And you talked about how at Chubb you loved your position when you were the DNO tech, where you got to kind of handle the meaty substance of the coverage issues and got to do all that without the administrative role. Is this somewhat similar, or do you have more of an administrative position now too?
It's all of it, honestly. Where I do get to handle some of the technical aspects. We do have general counsel as well who can help us with the more complicated legal issues in house. But it's all of it, from the administrative to the management to even the claims handling. I still handle a lot of the high level public D&O stuff,
Mhm.
and there isn't an aspect of it I don't love. In all honesty, I really feel like I'm in a great place. I when I started managing people and having to think about that HR aspect of things,
Mm-hmm.
that made me a little nervous at first because I didn't have to do that before. But now I really find that I enjoy it, and it's really an opportunity too to find people who are just launching their career and
Mm-hmm.
try to encourage and help them down a path that makes them happy as well.
So, and I'm asking out of curiosity, even for my for myself, like when you have someone who's like new into their career, like how do you approach it to like help them, kind of expand and push forward? Like, because I always struggle with this too, because I myself have always been like pretty much like a self motivator, and I definitely have had people help push me along. Um, but I'm always looking for advice on how to like, you know, encourage and push like younger talent in a way that isn't, I don't know how to say, like super pushy, like so like like in a positive way, not in a negative way, you know.
I think with my team, I have some individuals who have a lot of experience, and then I have some individuals who are newer, and the general environment that I like to foster with my group is one of trust, and I know these are like legal or corporate buzzwords, so people can fill out their bingo cards if they want, but like trust and collaboration. I want to make sure that no one's afraid to come to me and say, I don't understand what this means.
Mhm.
And especially when someone's starting out in the insurance industry, you're thrown about 200 different acronyms in the first month. Everything's an abbreviation, and it's so hard for people to admit, I don't know what that means. What is that? I don't understand what that means. What is a combined loss ratio? What is a loss ratio? Things like that. So making sure everyone feels comfortable enough to ask questions really helps develop a level of trust between both parties. That there is no judgment that you don't know this. You're not born knowing what, E&O stands for. These things are learned. Um, and I've really been quite fortunate to have team members that will come to me and say, I don't know what this means, or I need help with this, or hey, can we discuss this and bounce some ideas to see how we can resolve this. And I think it's about fostering a positive environment. And on top of that, for those who are new, I think this answers your question better, is trying to find what areas interest them the most.
Mhm.
When it comes to claims, there are so many different areas that can be of interest, and there are so many things that can actually be kind of triggering and upsetting. There are some types of claims that are really upsetting to read about, and when you get hit with a whole bunch of sexual molestation
Yeah.
claims, or you get hit with med mal cases that are involving infants, it can wear on you. So making sure that you find the right fit for the right person and paying attention to what makes them happiest is important.
Yeah. But sometimes though, I think the struggle is the individual being honest with you or with their manager about how they feel about those claims. Like it, because I think a lot of young talent what might have caution into going to their boss, like, like I can't, like these sexual assault claims, they're getting to me. So it's almost like you have to anticipate it on their behalf. Because I just think there's could be a fear in raising it, in that, okay, well, if I say I don't like it, then I'm what, like maybe I won't get anything to do. Not that there's ever a shortage of claims, but
There is no shortage, but at the same time, you can balance it out. You can make sure that nobody's getting a barrage of them,
yeah,
and make sure that they're spread evenly, so nobody's feeling overwhelmed by the emotional impact or having to deal with the issues that might come with reading things that are upsetting.
yeah.
So balancing it out is important, and making sure you have one or two, but you don't have 15.
Hmm.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, it's funny that like 15 years ago, you were the person that we all would go to help us to explain things. And that's when you were our colleague. So, I mean, it's no surprise that you've continued to rise up in the ranks, because I think you've always kind of taken on that mentoring role, even from the time that you entered into claims. So I'm
Well,
sure, everyone is super lucky to be on your team. I mean, you know that I'm a big fan. I always thought that, like, 'cause I mean, I was brand new, right? I'm coming in, and like you said, especially when you're coming in as a lawyer who's practiced for a couple years, you feel so embarrassed that you're starting back from the beginning. Like you think you should know what all the acronyms mean and you think you should know how to handle claims, but it's an entirely different world and you're starting over from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you again for saying that. I really do appreciate it. But I really always felt like one of the things that we don't do enough of, if somebody comes to you for a question, you might give them an answer, but you don't give them the background as to the why.
Yeah.
So I always spent a lot of focusing when somebody comes to me with a question, I explain why we do something a certain way, what's the reasoning behind that, because then I think it helps not only answer the question in a more thorough matter, but you're able to think about the why later when you have future questions.
Yeah.
And that probably prepared you for having children.
My whys are never good enough for them, but
No. And they don't listen either.
no, they don't.
I mean, I do try to explain it.
So you're talking a lot about your professional growth, and I think you're where you always wanted to be and where you hoped to land. And so I think I would like to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit to talk about your secondary adventure that you have been going on recently, and as you have delved into the world of politics. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that just sort of happened by accident, and just with the timing, with everything going on in the world the way it is. Back in 2016, I was a political science major in college, so I was always passionate about the topic, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the dialogue, and I enjoyed the conversation. And then in 2016, I started getting a little bit more involved in local politics, and I started helping out with campaigns and things like that, working with our local Democratic town committee. And then I ran for Board of Education. I think the first time I ran was 2019, and I lost. And that's okay. Like I'm very new to the community, and I take no, like, I mean, this is part of the process. I believe in the democratic process. So, and then in 2021, I technically lost again, but then I was put on to replace a member who was moving on to the Board of Finance. And then after that, I won the election, and now I'm chair of the Board of Education.
Wow.
And it has been quite a learning experience.
Well,
And so
yeah.
what are your duties kind of
Yeah.
as the chair of the Board of Education?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've learned a lot, and I still have more learning to do on this, because it's the boards of education are a really unique place, and we operate kind of as a whole unit. There's no one individual voice that should be louder than anyone else's. We work as a group in tandem. It's a unique sort of organization. The board chair is technically the voice of the board as a whole. So no one else should be making any sort of official announcements on behalf of the board except for me. I work very closely with our superintendent, like she's my new best friend in the world. We speak on basically a daily, if not more than once a day, in regard to a variety of issues. We're very fortunate to have a truly outstanding superintendent, and I enjoy working with her. I get to do all sorts of presentations and speeches. I run the Board of Education meetings. I help make decisions, or I communicate in regard to the I write articles for our local paper into regard to what's going on in our school system. I try to be a front line if there's some sort of urgent situation, especially if our teachers or our superintendent are getting hung up in the myriad of things they have to do at school while the situation is going on. And then I try to manage some of the background noise in an effort to protect and help develop our school system.
So go ahead, Jen.
What made you choose the Board of Education? I mean, I know a lot of people that COVID spurred a lot of people's interest in running for boards, just because, I mean, with everything going on in school or in person, virtual learning, masks, no masks, and but it seems as if you started your initial want prior to 2020. So like of all of the different ways you can help out politically, what made you choose education?
I really thought I needed more volatility in my life. So
perfect.
I really wanted some disruptive board meetings on my Wednesday nights. No, in all honesty, I'm a huge supporter of education as a general rule. And I have a sister who's a teacher. Um, I myself went to public school, and if it wasn't for the teachers that I had, I wouldn't have gotten where I was. So I just think education in and of itself is just the most important thing that we can provide to our children. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to provide them with the best. Starting in 2020, things did get very volatile
Mm-hmm.
with boards of education all across the state. Ours has not been immune to that. And in the beginning, it was really hard. And sometimes scary. There were times where things definitely got tense, and it made me nervous. But at the same time, it's so important. It's so important that we have people defending our teachers and the state of education in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it honestly, at this point, I consider it a huge privilege to be where I am. And I try to make sure that I reflect that, especially to our staff and administration. And on top of that, I can't say that I don't benefit from it, because I have learned a lot in regard to my own leadership skills. I've learned a lot about how to uh, be more tolerant of differences in opinions and try to be a better listener. And those are good skills to develop. So it's been an opportunity for me to learn and grow as well.
And how do you balance that with your already a very busy job? Like, how do you do it? Like, really, like, I'm like asking in a genuine way. Like, I'm like, how does Monica find time to do all this?
Well, first of all, my house is not as clean as I would like it to be. Let's
You should see below the camera here.
Same.
Surrounded by shoes. And
my children's playroom is right to the right of me, so I'm just looking there. I see things all over the floor. A lot of it has to do with organization. I really try very hard to keep a very strict calendar and make sure that I'm keeping track of everything. Also, I do my best to communicate with everyone, including my team at work. I communicate with the superintendent. I communicate with my other Board of Education members too, when I'm not available, when I'm out of town, when I will definitely be available, or how to reach me if there's an emergency. So it's a lot of communication and a lot of organization. Ever since I was little, I've been busy. Like, I was one of those kids. It drove my mom nuts because I had an activity every single day after school, and it absolutely made her crazy. And she was very supportive of it, I'll mind you, but she was just like, "Oh my gosh, can we not do something today?" And apparently that attitude has continued into adulthood. So I feel good being busy, and I feel good doing what I think is good. So I take a lot of pride in it.
I think, Jen, was I having this conversation with you about being busy? Maybe it's you. I don't know. I was talking to someone. It may have been Jen about just the kids and their schedules. And, I don't remember ever being as busy as my kids are. But also because probably my mom wouldn't have let me be that busy. Like, she just was not interested in, like, trekking me all over the place. But now I feel like with my own kids, I would rather have them have an activity and be busy after school, because if they're not, they don't do anything. And maybe that's because they're always busy. I don't know. So they don't know how to entertain themselves. I don't know. But it just seems to be the norm now too, is like to have pretty much almost every day there's some sort of activity. And hopefully it bodes well for them in the future.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
When
I'm sorry.
I was in middle school, the guidance counselor called my mom and was like, she needs to slow down. Like, you have to get her to calm down, sit down, and stop doing every activity. And my mom was like, why? It's fine. Don't worry about it. He's like, she's going to burn out. And I think he had a point that I'm seeing now as an adult, because I'm the same way. Like, I'm involved in a million things, and I'm always doing something. I'm always going, like, I can't sit down. And I'm noticing my kids are the same way. And I don't know if it's like, it just is inherently them, or if they see me going all the time. But like sometimes my middle daughter is a little like, she loves to just like sit like a lump on a log. So sometimes I have to like sit with her and watch a movie and be like, it's okay. I can relax for 2 hours and it's okay.
Yeah, I have that
Yeah,
problem.
I have that problem too. Even at night, if I have nothing to do, I end up rearranging cabinets and organizing the spices and doing things like that.
I feel like this now has turned into like an anonymous, not so anonymous meeting about staying this. Like we all collectively have the same problem.
It's the star sticker kids of the 80s and the 90s. I mean, what do
You
you think was going to happen to us?
right, exactly.
So you ran for Board of Education, and I know we touched on this a little bit last time we spoke. I mean, what are your thoughts of like, do you have any higher political aspirations, or what are your thoughts from here?
Um, you know, I would love to consider that a viable option, but realistically, it's not. It's incredibly difficult for people without independent means to run for any
Yeah.
sort of office. So, if you were to think about pathways to running, and again, I'm a firm believer in local politics. I think so many things can be accomplished on a local level, so I'm happy to remain involved there. But when you progress to the state level, if like we were to be a state representative in Connecticut, you only make $40,000 a year.
Mhm.
And while they say you're only in session for 3 months, you're still the representative for the entirety of the year. So you're still representing constituents, you're still managing constituent issues. And so it's really more of a full-time gig. And, unfortunately, it's hard to uh, uh, go from a corporate position to something like that unless you have that independent
Yeah.
means.
I agree. I think we may have discussed this, but one of my friends ran for state rep here in Scranton, and she won. And she's been our state rep now for probably about 6 years. But the amount of money spent, I handled her finances in her campaign, and the amount of money spent to campaign is more than what she makes in a year. But
Mhm.
that's what everybody does. I mean, it's all public. You can see what everybody spent, and it's turned into just such a crazy system that you have to put out all of that money in order to even be recognized for votes.
Right.
Yeah, it's not entirely fair in my point, in my perspective, because I think a lot of great people are unable to run for political office because of these limitations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, like, I don't know how it's going to be, how it could ever be fixed,
I
really,
don't-
because you need the money, right? So, so
if you've got a mortgage,
yeah.
yeah, it's true. I don't know what a better way is, but I do think people are missing out on opportunities.
No, absolutely. And my friend who does it, she's a nurse. And I think her initial intention was, I'm a nurse. I could do per diem work. I don't need to have
Hmm.
a job. And then, as you're saying, like, sure, you're only in session 3 months out of the year. But then on Tuesday, she has to speak at this event. And on Wednesday, she's expected to go to this event. And they're at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, it really is prohibitive from being able to do anything else on top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, so to pivot back to claims.
Claims.
what what are we here to talk about? Claims? Um, so when you moved into the chief claims officer role, what were some of like your initial like um challenges? Because it's a big role, it's a big job. Did you have imposter syndrome when you stepped into those shoes and be like, I don't belong here?
Oh, I think I've had imposter syndrome my whole life. I think that just comes with with existing at this point. I mean, yeah, definitely. For me, I try to practice what I preach about asking questions.
Mhm.
There were a whole new roles and responsibilities in regard to a variety of future planning meetings and things like that. Information that I had never seen before, data, reports, etc. So I had to learn what all of those were, and I had to try to understand them. So I would go to actuary, and I would say, why are you looking at it this way? what can I do to make it clearer for you, like, and try to understand their perspective. So it's been a lot of learning from a variety of different departments, um, and um, and everyone's just so great. Like the culture is just so amazing. Where they'll sit down with me for an hour and a half and go through the details. And anytime I say I don't understand what this means, I never feel like that's a problem.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure I do understand it so I can give them what they need to do their job well and have our company be successful. So I try to, practice what I preach in that regard. And then the management stuff that's again, I have a great team. I'm very lucky. I cannot stress that enough, and how great the people are that work with me. And then I've been doing a fair amount of travel too with underwriting. Uh, uh, for marketing purposes. And I really do enjoy that role as well. And that's something that I did do at Chubb for a while. I did travel around with the healthcare team. And that's another great perspective because you have the opportunity to see things from the broker's point of view
Mhm.
and an opportunity to hear things from the insured's point of view prior to them having a claim, because what an insured is thinking about before they have a claim is often different than what they're thinking once the claim comes in the door.
Mhm.
So getting them prepared for that concept is a great opportunity for us to um, develop a relationship should a nasty claim come in the door later.
Um, well, and I love what you're saying though about asking questions though and saying like I don't understand because especially like I think there is a there's a real fear in doing that, I think, from a lot of people because like, well, they're gonna think I'm not capable or I don't, and in fact, I think it's like quite the opposite. Like sometimes if someone's like, yeah, yeah, got it, got it, got it, got it, which I'm guilty of too, because sometimes
Of course.
I'm like, I don't want them to know I don't understand this. I'm just gonna go try to figure this out on my own. But asking the questions, it helps so much more in understanding what you're doing. And it also just kind of builds a rapport with you and that other person. I feel like if you're just yesing them and say, got it, got it, got it, and then go off, it's like a very like it's a 1 point interaction. Whereas if you engage back, you develop a stronger interaction. You're able to like work better together.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it develops trust too. They know I'm not trying to sneak anything past, or I'm not pretending I don't, or pretending I understand. I think it's one of those things that's kind of built in our society. We all want to make it seem like we know exactly what we're talking about all the time, when in fact, there's a lot to know.
Mhm.
Uh, there are a lot of things out there that we can't possibly comprehend just by existing. So I think it's so important to ask the questions. And I used to just little anecdote here. I had a friend who used to insert made up words in the meetings just to see if anybody would ask what the made up word meant.
Kind of love that idea.
It was a little corporate test, and I remember one of the words was spramp, and he said, "Listen, we're going to be working on this. We're going to try to spramp it up as much as we possibly can." Nobody asked, like nobody's like, "We don't. What is that word?" And it's completely made up. So it's in our culture to not ask and to be afraid of appearing as if we don't have all the answers. But I would rather admit that I don't have the answer, and then find the right person who does.
I mean, did
Then
anyone raise their hand and be like, I don't know what I don't think I would. I would be on my phone.
yeah, this was before the smartphone. Actually, this was like in the early 2000s that the Spramp example occurred.
What's spramping?
It probably means something in Urban Dictionary now. I don't know if I want to
Well,
know, but
as we discussed yesterday, I think you could probably just pop in, tween lingo into any meeting now and half people would have no idea what you're talking about.
So you talked a bit about how you mentor people and how you mentor people on your team. Have you ever had a mentor that you look up to or who you still look up to who helps you out?
I never had a formal mentor. I There was someone at Chubb that I very much looked up to, and she was a role model to me throughout my entire career at Chubb. We were only like in the same location for a very brief period of time, but when it came to all the questions, like anytime you guys gave me a hard question, it was very likely that I was consulting, um, with my pseudo mentor at Chubb in regard to those answers. Um, and beyond that, I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of really great people, and I have a lot of really great friends, particularly from the places I've worked, that I consider resources at all times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's great. And Megan, so when we all worked at Chubb, there was just an amazing group of people. And everyone's sort of dispersed at some point, but it's funny because I mean, now I'm back in Pennsylvania, so I'm not near anyone or I'm not working in the claims industry directly. But everyone's sort of, there's like pockets of them who continue to be together and kind of move around. So it's a really cool community. Um, and so I'm not sure if you're still lucky enough to work with or talk to a lot of the same people that you used to work with.
Yeah, I mean, currently in the claims group in the Hartford area, I think there's 5 of us that are Chubb
mhm.
alumni. Um, so it's really, there's a general positive atmosphere and a lot of trust and a lot of experience in the group, which is great.
Yeah. Well, it's because I mean, in this industry though, too, things are constantly changing and evolving. Companies are buying, companies merging. People move and they move up for promotions, and so I feel like you always kind of keep crossing paths in other ways, and you also never know, like someone that you worked with like might be at some position somewhere and they're like they really are looking for someone to fit a certain role, and they're like, oh well, I know so and so from my Chubb days, and they reach out to you, and it opens up other opportunities. I mean, but it's also genuine friendships, right? Like I've had this discussion with a lot of people because I feel like there's like this sometimes a negative connotation, like, oh, they're just work friends. I'm like, no, like like they're not just work friends. Like you develop like real relationships and friendships with people that I sometimes I think can be stronger than the outside of work type friendships, because it just you develop a great bond with these people.
I mean, I absolutely agree with that, and been very fortunate to encounter several people like that. And there's just a trust. It's like I
Mhm.
know someone knows this topic better than me. I know I can trust their opinion on it, and knowing that they're not going to try to throw you under the bus, or
Yeah, that too.
yeah. I mean, that does exist in some places, and I'm grateful to have not experienced it much, with the people I've worked with.
Um, but in your role though, what are some of um what are some of your pressure points?
I think volume is always an
Mhm.
issue, and making sure you're staying top of the things that are gonna blow up. It, in the DNO world, a lot of times nothing happens until it happens, and
Yeah.
then you're in a rush mode to try to get things accomplished. I work very hard to stay on top of those things, and have my team stay on top of it. And so much of it is gut.
Mhm.
Whereas where experience becomes so important in these types of claims is that gut, like, yeah, this is going to be a problem, this one's gonna hit, and then keeping a careful watch over it, so when it explodes, you're not telling the powers that be that you need $5 million tomorrow. You're saying it ahead of time, you're
Yeah.
preparing ahead of time, you're trying to find strategies in order to resolve something early in an effort to get it off the board and try to make it better. So yeah, I think managing volume as well as the complexity is an issue for the DNO side.
Yeah, because they're complex claims. I mean, they're not. I mean, I think it's hard to say this. I don't like to use the word simple claims, but when you're talking about DNO claims, I don't know if there's a simple one to be found.
Um, a solid basic breach of contract claim would be great. I mean, so that's about as basic as it can get
You're
there.
not gonna see that.
No, no, and if it is, maybe we're covering defense expenses. It's
Yeah.
but it's you get a lot of tortious interference. You get a lot of antitrust, regulatory, that all of that. When you start getting into the public DNO, I mean, that's a whole different animal.
Mhm.
And uh, I find them fascinating, which is good because that's my job, right? But they are definitely different than the other
Mm.
kinds.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of EPL too, and EPL is definitely a high volume. Although the the stories might not be as complex. What you're managing there are personality.
Yeah.
And settlement with the pro. Jen's giving the big
That's what,
head nod. Yeah.
speaking our language.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the initial conversation we had, right, about being a plaintiff's attorney, because it's the same thing. It's more about, I handled plaintiff's claims for a little bit as a plaintiff's attorney. I did a bunch of years of family law, and I've done most of my experiences in EPL. All the same. You are a part therapist. I mean, it's just about managing expectations.
Yep. Which is very time consuming.
Yes.
It is. It is very time consuming, but it throws just like an interesting wrench in there, right? Into the whole complexity of settling a case or managing a case.
Right. Yeah. The human condition is of utmost importance in those types of claims, and understanding it and being able to manage it.
And speaking of claims with a bunch of high feelings, are homeowners claims, the HOA claims, under your D&O branch?
We don't do that at Cap Specialty. I did manage those at a Chubb when I first started off there, before I started going into the healthcare space. Yeah, that's a lot of managing expectations as well.
Mm-hmm.
That is managing a $200,000 lawsuit over a quarter inch of a deck on the back of somebody's yard. So, which, in some regards may be just as difficult as a public D&O claim.
In several ways, it could be. Yes.
Yeah.
The expectations of a flagpole that went up in somebody's yard. So.
But with all of these, like, and Jen and I have this discussion a lot. We like that sometimes when things feel like they're getting out of control, or not so much out of control, but like not going how you're planning because someone has these unrealistic expectations, you have to still remind yourself that there's only so much that you can do, and you can't change what you can't change, right? So you and you can't control what you can't control. So you can do it all right, but if that individual's expectations are sky high, and you've done everything you can to get them down to where they should be, and it's just not working, it's a lot of times it's not you. It's not you, it's them. But it's hard on you, because you're like, well, it causes some stress and anxiety and and frustration, because you're doing what you should be doing. It's just you can't, the ends aren't aligning.
Yeah. I mean, at those moments, that's when it's important to call out the resources around you, to help reel it in. Sometimes it's a different personality who's able to make a change, or you push to get the matter into mediation, so the plaintiff can have a big emotional purge at the beginning, and then maybe you can get something done later in the afternoon. So yeah, it's important not to internalize or personalize it. It isn't about us.
Yeah. Even though it can feel like it sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, I called Megan probably about 2 weeks ago, and I was like almost in tears over a case. And I was like, it's not going the way I want to. And she's like, well, what did you do? And I told her everything. She's like, you've done everything you can. Like, you can't control at a certain point. You can't control what's happening. Like, the client is the one who ultimately did X that resulted in Y, and like you can only manage what you can in the middle of it with the resources that you have. And sometimes it's hard to be able to realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why our jobs can be very mentally tolling. And why people like us need to stay busy. Well, Monica, we are just about out of time, but I want to close up asking you this. Since you've gone through so many different changes in your career, different progressions, so knowing what you know now, what advice would you give young Monica?
Oh, I have a lot of things to say to younger Monica.
Here's your chance.
No, I think the first thing I would say is to be true to who you are, and not to be afraid to ask questions. Like in the beginning of my career, I was afraid to ask questions. I mean, even when I started with practicing law, I was afraid. I feel like I could have learned so many things so much better if I had asked questions. So I think that's probably the most essential element of what I would say to me back then.
Well, and
I'll have some extra thoughts later to myself.
What's amazing about that, though, is that the advice that you would give your young self is exactly like the freedom that you're giving to your younger employees. So it's almost like you're giving back to them what you wish you knew then, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I like thinking of it that way. I mean, I hope it's of benefit. I just want people to trust themselves and know that being happy and being true to who you are and being comfortable with who you are is really important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that you might not realize it though until you're in your 40s.
Yeah, you start realizing a lot of things in your 40s. So.
Like, I mean, I sometimes give my kids different advice though too. You know, I'm like, well, you're in middle school. I know you want to be an individual, but you might also want to blend in a little bit. Now's not the time.
I think I had a similar conversation with my 10-year-old. He's very unique. I'm like, just maybe sometimes blend. Just blend.
Like, you don't know your audience right now. Like, your audience isn't going to be kind to the difference.
Exactly.
I see what you post about your sons, and there's some ways that I wish I still lived in Connecticut, because I feel like my son and your sons, they would have a grand time together.
I agree. I think they would. It would be fantastic.
Well, maybe you should make them like email pals or gaming pals. Gaming pals.
Everybody's gaming.
Yeah, my tech guy, he's gaming all right.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for joining us. I really loved sitting down and chatting with you. And of course, everyone listening, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.